Welcome to Vegan Speech. I'm Fred Hunt. That's Ted Coley. Hey, Ted Coley.
Hey, Fred.
How are you doing today?
Super.
I am looking in the camera and I feel like I'm getting fat. Can you tell that? Can you tell I'm getting fat?
I hadn't noticed.
Okay. Well, don't tell me now. Tell me off camera because I want to cry
I
on
think your
camera.
clothes are making you look fat.
What is Beacon of Speech? Beacon of Speech is me bitching and moaning and complaining, and Ted trying not to kill himself on camera. Would you say that's about accurate today?
Yeah.
In the same realm? What we're going to talk about is Ted's favorite subject. Football! Football! We're going to talk about football. Ted Coley.
Are you talking about soccer?
No, real football, not that pansy
Because
soccer.
Isn't that what soccer is called?
Yeah, it is. I was joking around about that. We're going to talk about American football. Last night, the Alliance of American Football played their first game. Now, Ted's memory is much better than mine. Do you remember who played in the game? I wrote it down because I wasn't even sure I could remember 5 minutes later. We were watching the video right before we came on.
San Diego and San Antonio?
San Diego and San Antonio. Now, this league is owned by the NFL. And basically they want this to be the AAA of the NFL.
Oh, okay. So the NFL is condoning this?
Yes, they own this. And they're out there, and the game that we watched last night was on CBS Sports. Okay? Now it was
so you know what it kind of reminds me of? Like when you have like a product and that product makes like a generic version of the product.
Yeah.
You know, the same company owns both products, but
it reminds me, I read an article this week. Coke is coming out with a new flavor, right? Do you remember when they came out with new Coke and they basically burned the nation down? Okay? What happened is that they came out with a new product this week, and it was Orange Vanilla Coke. Would you try Orange Vanilla Coke?
I might try it, but
even in a best case scenario, in 40 years, Orange Vanilla Coke will never be Coke. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah.
So basically the AAF is Orange Vanilla Coke. Okay? It's nice. It'll have a niche audience, blah, blah, blah. The NFL owns it. So what they're going to do is they're going to use this as a feeder system. Kids who wash out of college, guys who are trying to get back to the NFL. There's a few names you'd recognize. Trent Richardson's in the AAF.
Okay, yeah. Running back?
Yeah, running back Trent Richardson. So the AAF is all about keeping eyeballs on the NFL. Now, San Antonio wants a franchise. So they're like, holy cow, if we sell out, maybe a franchise. They'll see what good fans we are. They'll bring a franchise to San Antonio.
They want an NFL franchise.
Right. And San Diego's like, no, we still love this. We still love the NFL. It was stupid Spanos. That's why they moved. Right? So that's why it's like these cities are like begging the NFL. Like, oh, look, we love the AAF. Come bring your NFL franchise here. So there's a little bit of begging. But last night it was on CBS. Okay, and locally in Cleveland it was Channel 19. Okay, next week the games are on the CBS Sports Network. Do you have that channel on your cable system?
CBS Sports Network?
Yeah, CBS Sports Network.
I couldn't even tell you. Is that like another CBS channel?
Yeah, it's like you know how NBC is CNBC and MSNBC and NBC Sports.
Yeah,
they want people to subscribe to the CBS Sports channel. Now, if you have it, you'll watch it.
Yeah, I probably don't have it.
But you're not going to call your cable provider and say, I need CBS Sports.
No.
Now, or you can watch it on your other favorite NFL channel. The AAF will be a unique product on the NFL Network.
Another channel I don't have.
So what they are doing is, again, the cherry vanilla Coke analogy. You can't get the cherry vanilla Coke everywhere. You can only get it in certain spots. And you're going to have to look for the cherry vanilla Coke. Now, the NFL Network is purely doing it for ratings. Okay, if the ratings are high enough, they'll be able to sell the AAF to CBS or NBC or ABC for another $1 billion or whatever. But this is a question I have for you, and you don't know the answer. Okay, but we're gonna flesh this out a little bit. There's a brand new product called Cherry Vanilla. The AAF. Okay, very first game of the AAF. It was against NBA football or NBA basketball. Who got better ratings? The first game of AAF or NBA basketball?
I'll say NBA basketball.
Nope, the AAF.
Well, that's good.
They're a brand new product that has existed for one day is already pulling better numbers than the NBA, which goes back to what you always say, football is king. It might not be king in 20 years, it might not be king in 30 years, but right now, it is a license to print money.
Yeah.
And me and you, Ted, we're both suckers. Me and you both watched it. We talked about it before we started. I watched parts of the third quarter. When did you watch it?
Basically the same time.
Yeah. Turned it on around 9:30, and I'm like, oh,
I didn't even know it was on.
Oh,
I
was
just going through the channels. I didn't even know this league was starting.
Oh.
I mean, I know that you, I think, mentioned it.
I mentioned it.
But I didn't know it was starting yesterday.
Yeah. So what had happened is my kid's playing video games. It's like 9 o'clock, and she's like, I'm done playing video games. I'm going upstairs. I said, hey, can I watch football? She's like, oh, you can't trick me. Football's over. I'm like, get out of here. Right? Off you go. Okay? So kid leaves, turn on AAF football, and I'm like, it looks... Oh, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of, what was the NFL league in Europe? World League.
Or the World Football League?
Yeah, World Football League. You know, where they had the Barcelona Dragons and the London Monarchs and stuff? That's what it reminded me of, where you're watching it and you're like, this is like a notch slower than NFL football. Now, with that being said, that doesn't mean there weren't some extremely good plays. Me and you watch. How many times do we watch that guy get sacked and the quarterback's helmet flew off? Right? And people were commenting if that was the NFL, they would have flown 30 flags. Right? Because the NFL is worried about getting sued for concussions.
Yeah.
Okay? Which is going to take us to our next subject, but I want to tie this up on...
Do you think that guy has a concussion?
I don't think he has a concussion because they hit him in the chest and the helmet flew off. Right? It was like Abbott and Costello. It's like, whoop! You know? So I don't think he got hit in the head, per se.
Is it true that you can get a concussion without getting hit in the head?
Oh, yeah, yeah. If you're like rattled, if your head snaps.
I mean, well,
that
might, he might have fallen under that category.
Yeah, well, and it could happen. I don't think it happened, but you never know. Right now, they're in a league where it is loaded in the NFL's favor. I wouldn't be surprised if they had to sign a waiver that says if you play in the AAF, you're waiving rights to sue them later. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But back to the NFL. So people saw a horrible Super Bowl. Horrible Super Bowl with horrible commercials. Did I watch it? Of course I did. Did you watch it?
Mm-hmm.
Of course you did. Right? We watched it because we're NFL fans. Right? Because I'm born and bred. Even it's almost like cigarettes. You know, we should quit watching it, but we don't.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And we shouldn't be bragging about it. We should be like, oh yeah, we so watch the NFL. You know, we're getting NFL highlights in a brown paper bag like the Playboys used to go. Like, I'm so ashamed. But that's the whole situation right now, is that's where the NFL is. You have old addicts, old cigarette. We can't quit the NFL habit. Right? So the NFL came and went.
So what would the AAFL be then? Like vaping or something?
Yeah. Well, and that's where I'm going. What happened is Vince McMahon took out a loan for millions of dollars. And he said, he came out news conference, scoot over. I'm Vince McMahon. I'm bringing the XFL back! XFL! XFL! Talk about me! XFL! Right? And you remember that. You heard that the XFL was coming back. You didn't know about the AFL until I told you about the AFL. Vince McMahon got on, screamed about the XFL. Literally one day after he came and screamed about the XFL, the NFL put out a press release and said, "Oh no, don't watch XFL. We're going to bring our own spring football, AAFL. That's what it's going to be called." Like they were doing this on the fly.
Do you know how many teams are in this league?
I believe there's 8.
Only 8?
Yes.
Now, are they going to have a Super Bowl or like an
No.
equivalent?
Well, I think they're going to have like because they still don't want to take away.
What are they going to play each other like 5 times a season?
I think don't quote me on it, because it's spring football. I think they play each team once, and then all the teams above 500 play each other, and then it's over by Memorial Day, and then you get a break, and then training camp starts in July. You see what I'm saying? And so you miss it a little bit. You're like, oh, AAFL's over, right? So 7 weeks, again, we'll do the math, starts in February, goes through March, goes into April, takes a week off, and then you got playoffs, ends in May, right? So the math makes sense.
Believe it or not, I'm not entirely against this.
Well, here is my problem, okay? And this is what me and you were talking about before we started. I thought it was good, but not great. And you could tell they were a little off their game, but the coach of one of the teams, I remember he was a real heavy guy. He had gray hair, and I thought could be me in 10 years, right? Real frumpy.
Oh, is that Martz?
Yeah. And they're like, yeah, that's Mike Martz. I'm like, holy cow, right? I'm like, I remember when he used to look good, when he used to be running up and down the sidelines, and his team's throwing for 500 yards. You know, they were going for 500 yards yesterday. You know what I mean? He might be a genius, but... And then Bob Stoops is supposedly doing it from Oklahoma. And he said, yeah, he goes, coaching Oklahoma football was 24/7 job. Because as soon as the last snap came off, you're recruiting for next year. So the job never ends. So he came to the AAF because he wanted to do something part-time for fun. So they're selling this as a fun AAA option. You see what I'm saying? Here's my issue with it. Is that they're not doing it out of like the goodness of their hearts. They're like, how can we stop the XFL from taking our money? We are football. There is, when you say football, nothing else exists. Okay, maybe college football a little bit. But when it comes to football, there is you don't talk about European football or South, and you definitely don't talk about any other leagues but the NFL. NFL is all about self-preservation. So they are cutting the XFL off at the knees. Now, if the XFL comes in and they say they want to be more like the CFL, right? They're like, we're going to open up the end zones. We're going to emphasize passing, you know what I mean? There's ways they can try and take things away from the NFL. You see what I'm getting at? And
is arena football still going? No, seriously.
Arena football was up to 24 teams in the spring and summer. Last year, where they were down to 5 teams, okay? The Cleveland Gladiators were one of the 5 teams. I saw one of their last games. And then they said, well, Dan Gilbert wants to fix up the queue, so we're going to go on a 2-year hiatus. Right? Because you remember sports teams that go on 2-year hiatuses. You know how well that works out. So right now, there's an arena league with 5 teams, including the Cleveland Gladiators, who are on a 2-year hiatus. So right now we shouldn't be doing Beacon of Speech. We should be going to the Gladiators game up at the Q. But instead we're doing, so I'm sorry, Ted, we don't get to do the Gladiators. Okay? But that shows how off the radar. There are 3 or 4 different arena leagues, and those leagues, from what I understand, is it's like the Southern Arena Football League, you know, in Louisiana and Texas. You get paid $100 a game, which, hey, does that sound like good? You'd be like, I don't know, I make more working on my regular job. I don't think I want to play, you know, and get smacked in the head for $100. There are no arena teams that pay real money, you know what I mean, that you could actually live on. And all those guys have day jobs, and they're dreaming of one day getting cut at training camp and making $600,000. So you see what I'm getting at? So Arena League doesn't really exist. They do, but technically they do, but they don't. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But this is what I'm getting at. The NFL is about controlling football. Okay? And that's why they have a spring league, to stop the XFL. Okay?
Now, is the XFL going to go ahead anyway?
Yes, because I believe they're going to have 20 teams, but whereas the AAF is going in markets where the NFL doesn't exist, just like the Cleveland Indians, their minor league teams not in Cleveland. Their minor league teams are in Columbus. I'm trying to think. Where are their minor league teams? Columbus,
Akron.
The Lake Erie Crushers. They're single A, right? And then I think Kinston, South Carolina is their rookie league. So 3 of the 4 minor league affiliates are in Ohio, but not in Cleveland. You see what I'm saying? So the AAF is trying to focus on markets that are thirsty for football, and they see it as an audition, like NFL, come to our town in the future. You see what I'm getting at? So, but the XFL is like, oh no, we're going to put teams in New York and LA and Dallas.
Because the XFL was around a few years ago.
Right. They were around a few years ago.
But that didn't last too long, did it?
It lasted 1 or 2 years, and they were bleeding money. I mean, like...
And isn't there some kind of, like, different wrinkle to the XFL? Like, aren't they, like, more violent or something?
Yeah, they were more... They had all kinds of gimmicks. Like, I remember the XFL, if you would be watching, and they'd have an overhead camera. And the overhead camera would swing across the field and do the players while they were in their huddle, right? As soon as the XFL folded, the NFL came out and said, we had a great idea. An overhead camera. And they're like, XFL did it. They're like, really? Huh. No, I'm pretty sure that was our idea. And then the XFL...
Did they patent it?
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing. So the XFL had good ideas, which the NFL stole. And then the NFL is like, no, we have lots of ideas in the pipeline that take years and years.
Yeah, we had that idea. We just never used it.
Yeah, we just didn't use it. And so the XFL is thinking about, I heard a rumor, I don't know if this is true, where they wouldn't have extra points. You know, you got to go
for the XFL?
Yeah, you got to go for a 2-point conversion every time. But maybe that's the AAFL. And I'm confused. The point is that they are trying to cut off Vince McMahon at the knees because people are thirsty for football, and the NFL's like, no, football in the fall will be fine, and then you want to talk about... One of the greatest scams of the NFL is the NFL draft. For 3 days, they can sell ad space on the draft. And how many games do they play?
What's that?
When they're doing the draft. How many officials do they use? None.
Yeah.
How many stadiums do they use? None. They convinced that the draft is a sporting event. You see what I'm getting at? That is another way to print free money.
I'm going to make a prediction.
Okay.
There's, in the near future, there's going to be so many different football leagues that they're just going to start, like, rushing baseball fields as the baseball teams are playing. And they're going to be going into, like, NBA, NBA arenas as they're playing and just overtake the game.
Yeah. I read an article, and I said, I assume that the NFL would be excited to have the Arena League. And they said, no, the NFL's not really excited for anybody except for the NFL. That the NFL is almost like a giant cult. They are only happy about the NFL. And the only reason they're not mad at college football is because they give the NFL free talent. You see what I'm saying?
Just picture like the Indians and the Red Sox playing, and you just see like a bunch of football players like run onto the field and like just completely take over the field.
Let me ask you a question. I don't bring up my wife very often at Beacon of Speech because she doesn't want to deal with Beacon of Speech. I think honestly she's annoyed by it. But let me tell you about how powerful the NFL is.
Is Beacon of Speech like having a fly in the house?
Yeah, we can't get rid of that damn fly. It's like, are you still doing Beacon of Speech? She asked me yesterday. She goes, "You watch sports?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "I just read that Bob Costas retired." I'm like, "Well, he didn't retire, but they terminated his contract." And she goes, "Well, what did he do?" And I said, "He said bad things about the NFL." And she goes, "Well, like what?" And she goes, that doesn't seem like him. And I said, a couple of years ago. And of course, I had to read more of the story. And you can read about it on ESPN just today. They have a long version of this. 2 or 3 years ago, Bob Costas came out. And they gave him, do you remember a couple of years ago when Bob Costas would come out on Sunday Night Football and he would talk about like the liberal agenda?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I was going to make a joke that they let him go because he was becoming a pain in the ass.
Yes. And so they said, we love Bob Costas. You can talk about anything. And he would come out and he would, wax poetically about baseball or whatever's going on in football. And right when there was a movie called Concussions, and it had to do with CTE and NFL players. And Bob Costas came out and he goes, you know what, this might be controversial. And I am going to give my essay. And his bosses gave him free rein to say whatever he wanted. If he wanted to talk about Obama, he could. If he wanted to talk about baseball, he could. If he wanted to talk about football. He goes, he was afraid that it was biting the hand that feeds him. So he gave the sheet to his bosses and said, what do you think about this? Bosses never got back to him, right? So he went on, he went on the air and he goes, you know what? There's something concerning going on called concussions, and there's all these CTE studies, and I hope that the NFL is addressing all of these issues. And I, in good conscience, cannot come on Sunday Night Football and not tell you what I see and what I am hearing. And I know these old players. And I am heartbroken by some of the things I see. Thank you for my 10 minutes. Thank you for my free speech. And, have a good night. Enjoy the second half of the Browns Steelers
picture
game.
Like the average football fan, the stereotypical football fan.
Yeah.
What he thinks of Bob Costas's, remarks.
Well, and that's the thing.
Get him off there.
Yeah, get him down. Why are you speaking your mind? So Bob Costas says what he has to say, see you later, and he leaves. And he said all of a sudden people from the NFL are contacting him and they're like, yeah, well, what made you say that?
Just picturing a guy throwing a beer bottle at him.
Yeah, like Bottlegate. God damn it, Bob Costas! So he said he started to get some blowback. Like, why would you talk about this? And he's like, listen, there's CTE studies, there's this movie, there's all this stuff. He goes, I can't ignore what is going on. And the NFL's like, maybe we don't want you to work the Super Bowl. And Bob Costas is like, excuse me? And they're like, maybe we don't want to have you work the Super Bowl. And he's like, really? Right? And Bob Costas is a really smart guy, and he can read the room. And again, go on ESPN and read about why Bob Costas was fired. And Bob Costas didn't want to argue with the guy.
When did this happen?
Well, it happened a couple of months ago.
That he was fired?
Right. But again, they quietly fired him. They let him work out what had happened. And let me finish my story. They took him off the Super Bowl and they said, you know what? Bob Costas is getting into his 60s and we want to go in a younger direction. Nothing personal. We love Bob Costas. And then they started to take him off of Sunday Night Football, right? And then they started to take him off of football coverage altogether. Well, NBC is like, whoa, we're paying this guy $10 million a year, but you don't want him on football coverage. That's how we pay his salary. And the NFL's like, oh, is that how you pay his salary? They leveraged Bob Costas out of his job. And NBC's like, well, we're still going to send him to the Olympics, right? And Bob Costas is like, well, you can keep putting me on baseball games. Baseball games they said some baseball games are drawing about as good as MLS soccer, right? So NBC is like, we're not going to put him on baseball games for $10 million a year. He is not worth it. And the NFL's like, oh, well, just so you know, we just don't want him on any of the assignments anymore. And so NBC, when his contract came up, he had literally nothing to do about football because whenever Bob Costas was asked, what do you think about concussions? He goes, well, I'm pretty sure there's a direct link between playing in the NFL and getting concussions. And the NFL's like, oh, gee, why does he still work for NBC? But NBC, what they did is they took him off the coverage slowly. First he was off the Super Bowl, and then he's off the playoffs, then he's off Sunday Night Football. You see what I'm saying? And Bob Costas is like, listen, you're the boss, meaning NBC. Whatever you put me on is what I will do. But when I speak, I'm going to speak what's on my mind. And the NFL's like, you see what I'm getting at? So in this long article on ESPN today, they're interviewing Bob Costas. And Bob Costas goes, listen, the last thing I ever want to do in my whole life is butt heads with the NFL. He goes, I'm telling you right now, I am not here to bite the hand that feeds me. Okay? I 100% realize that I wouldn't have been making 10 million or 5 million, or however much he was making. I would never have made that money without the NFL. Never. And would you agree with that?
Yeah.
But some people don't have that realization. Some people think they get money from the magical spigot. Bob Costas is like, oh, no. I understand where the money comes from, and I also understand the NFL's reservations. But he goes, I have a conscience, and I cannot ignore my conscience and just cash checks. You don't meet people like that. Bob Costas says, I have enough money to where me and my kids have a comfortable living. I have plenty where I do not have to ignore what's going on in my head. You see what I'm saying? And the NFL's like, get Costas out of here! What don't you understand? And Bob Costas says, it's amazing, and this comes into our work, okay? Bob Costas, as clear as he can say, he goes, my boss is not the NFL. My boss is NBC. I am a broadcaster. NBC writes my checks. Now, granted, the NFL gives NBC the money, but I don't work for the NFL. And if I worked for the NFL and they told me to shut my mouth, I would just quit. Whereas NBC is like, well, we'll put you on other assignments, but you, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you know how you get your money. You see what I'm getting at? And Bob Costas is like, listen, I'm in my 60s. I don't need this anymore. If I'm calling plays for the local the local college baseball team down my street, I'm happy, right? But you cannot buy my conscience, right? And the NFL is going absolutely crazy. And Bob Costas is like, listen, in no business in the world does the customer have, the customer is NBC Sports, right? And I'm trying to see the way Costas put it, because he's spot on. You work for a company. We won't say who it is, right? But I'm pointing to it, right? You work for a company. At the end of the day, we'll make up a make-believe company, Company X, and they dictate to your company that's on your chest, right? And Bob Costas's argument is no company dictates that the customer tells them what to do more than the NFL. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It would almost be like, say you go to Company X. You go to Company X in Cleveland, okay? And Company X says, you know what? We hate Ted. We want you to fire him. And we're like, well, what did Ted do wrong? And they're like, well, he didn't do anything wrong, but we don't like the way he carries himself when he walks down the aisle. And he also said that, Company X... do you remember when we used to service Union Carbide?
Yeah.
And then they changed their name because they killed all those people in India. It'd be like you walking through the...
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. So it'd be like you walking down the hall and the IT guy's talking, and then you're like, didn't your company kill all those people in India? And they're like, you know what? Ted's not coming here anymore. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
And be like, okay, well, Ted, you're not going to Union Carbide anymore or Company X. We'll just put you somewhere else. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Whereas, and again, Bob Costas framed it as he is the media. He's not.
Yeah.
So
you're saying it'd be like if Union Carbide would be like, no, that's not good enough. You have to get rid of him.
Yeah, you have to fire Ted. Well, Ted didn't do anything wrong. We don't like the way Ted is saying things. And you're like, well, we don't want to lose Union Carbide as a customer because they're so awesome. We're just going to fire Ted. You see what I'm saying? And, Ted's like, oh, you know what? I'm 60-something. I don't need this. You see what I'm getting at? But usually your company sticks up for you. You see what I'm saying? And the company that Bob Costas works for is NBC Sports. But he works for the media, which is supposed to give him investigative powers. You see what I'm getting at? Now, we'll go back to the Union Carbide example. Union Carbide would be like, what's Ted Coley's problem? He'd be like, he's not a reporter. He's only here to bring me my boxes. Tell him to shut up and bring the boxes. And then your boss X, would say, listen, Ted, don't talk about all the dead Indians. Just take them their boxes and smile, and then walk out. And then you like to get paid, so you'll be like, okay, I will not talk about the people that Union Carbide killed, right? Bob Costas' argument is, and I hope I'm spelling it out correctly, is that he's the media and he cannot ignore things. You know what I mean? It'd be like sending, Bob Costas is part of the media, and you send in a Union Carbide, and you'd be like, oh yeah, did you ever settle that suit in India? Bob Costas, you and the damn people in India, they're dead, what are we going to do? And Bob Costas, we go on to the news the next day, well, the people at Union Carbide, they don't seem to care. It's the same analogy. Now, you don't know what company it is anymore because Union Carbide changed their name, so don't say the new name, okay? But it's the same general principle, and that's what Costas is trying to get at. He's like saying NBC should... But they want that money. They want that $5 billion contract because they don't have anything that brings viewers to their network. And name any TV show on NBC right this second. Can you name any TV show on NBC?
On NBC?
On NBC. Any TV show. Anyone else.
Saturday Night Live.
Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live. That would be like Saturday Night Live saying, listen, we don't like Bob Costas. We don't like Bob Costas saying that Saturday Night Live's not as funny as it used to be, right? You know what NBC News would say? They'd be too effing bad. Bob Costas is our guy. If he thinks Saturday Night Live's not as funny as it used to be, that's his prerogative, and he has sourcing, and he has facts to back it up, and blah blah blah. And believe it or not, you're not as good as Belushi, right? But in the NFL's case, they're like, oh, the NFL does not like you, so you are going to disappear. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
And so Costas is bitter. And again, right now, he's not talking on NBC. After he was terminated, ESPN did a story because technically they didn't fire Bob Costas. They didn't renew his contract. And they just said, see you later, after, I believe, 40 years. And Bob Costas is like, listen, I am not asking for any of this attention. I could disappear and do a Kansas-Missouri football game and be... You see what I'm saying?
He was there that long?
Yeah.
40 years?
40 years at NBC.
Damn.
And he goes, but people keep asking me, why aren't I at NBC? And I'm like, I love NBC. The NFL told them to get rid of me, and they could not justify my salary. And he's like, I'm not bitter because that's the way the world is. The whole premise is that this is not the way the world should work. And where do you hear that from? Well, every single goddamn week, Ted.
Yeah.
So I felt horrible for Bob Costas, but he's like, don't feel bad for me. I had a good run, and someone else will hire me. Someone will pay me $200,000 to go on a cable network and do baseball. You see what I'm saying? Maybe the Major League Network will hire me, and I'll talk about the Cardinals every day, and it'll be a dream job, and I can drift into the sunset.
See, now you're making me hate football.
Well, no, but the whole point is that the NFL is not about football. They are about themselves.
Yeah.
And they're about protecting the shield. How many times have you heard protecting the shield? 100 times. Whether it's getting rid of Bob Costas to trying to drive out the XFL.
The brand.
The brand, which is what we talk about all the time. And I write about the LeBron brand all the time. Do you mind if we talk about LeBron brand? I'll make you hate basketball today.
Make you hate basketball? Yeah, go ahead.
Who does LeBron James think he wants to be? I'm covering it up.
Who does LeBron James...
What is the ghost that LeBron James chases? He wants to be better than this ghost.
Michael Jordan?
Michael Jordan. Now, and I've told you this before, maybe in one of our first episodes, before LeBron James said he wanted to win the championship. He said, I want to be a billionaire. Okay? Now, is Michael Jordan a billionaire? This is a trick question for Ted Coley.
Is Michael Jordan a
Is
billionaire?
Michael Jordan a billionaire?
I'll say yes.
You are correct. How did Michael Jordan become a billionaire? That is the trick question.
How did he become a billionaire?
How did he become a billionaire?
Endorsements.
No. You want to try again?
How did he become a billionaire? I don't know. Does he own a team?
Yes, he does. And that is how. Michael Jordan was making $30, $40, $50 million a year at his peak. He had a contract for like $10 million, and then he got $10 million from McDonald's, $10 million from Gatorade, right? If you take all those millions and put them in a giant bucket, it still does not equal $1 billion. It doesn't. Michael Jordan in the year 2000, and forgive me if I didn't write it down, but I believe it was in 2006.
Oh, did he buy the Wizards or something?
He bought the Charlotte Bobcats. Okay. And he scraped together $50, $70 million, saved his pennies and nickels. Now, me and you don't have pennies and nickels, right? But he became a minority owner. The team was for sale for $175 million, and he already owned a minority stake in it, $50, $70 million. In the year 2010, I believe, the team went up for sale for $175 million, and he said, "Listen, I'm taking all the money I have and pouring it into the Bobcats, and I am the owner of the Bobcats." Now, question from me to you is, can you name one player in the Bobcats today?
No,
because they're not the Bobcats anymore. They changed their name to the Hornets. After Michael Jordan bought the Bobcats, he put all his money into it. And granted, I'm sure he still had $10 million on the side, but he put almost all his money into the Bobcats. The very next year, the winning percentage of the Bobcats was 100. I believe they went 7-60. It was a strike-shortened year. It was the worst record in the history of the NBA. And I read stories about how horrible Michael Jordan was as a president when he was with the Wizards, how horrible he is as an owner of the Bobcats. Now, and there's a payoff to this story. Michael Jordan bought the Bobcats, now the Hornets, for $175 million. Do you know what the Hornets are worth today? I looked it up right before I went on air. What are the Hornets worth?
I'll say 1.2 billion.
1.25 billion.
That was a total guess too.
That's good, Mike.
And I knew it had to be at least a billion because you said he's a billionaire.
He made, in under a decade, $1 billion profit on the Hornets alone. That doesn't include the commercials. That doesn't include his playing days. That doesn't include Space Jam residuals. $1 billion by being owner of the Hornets. And you cannot name one player in the Hornets. Okay?
Have they ever had a good season? Or
when they were back in the 90s, when they were, Larry Johnson and Lonzo Mourning.
Yeah, but this was before he bought them.
Right. And then that Charlotte Hornets moved to New Orleans because Charlotte didn't support them. So Michael Jackson bought the expansion Bobcats. You see what I'm saying?
Michael Jackson?
I said Michael Jackson. Michael Jordan bought the expansion Bobcats. Right? So he became a billionaire through investing in ownership.
What I'm getting at is that when he bought them for $175 million,
mm-hmm.
to now when they're worth $1.25 billion, have they ever been any good?
I believe they went to one playoff series and got swept. I think that's it.
What I'm getting at is, look, if you own a professional team, it's like you can do no wrong.
Right. Well, the right one. If you own an indoor soccer team.
Well, when I say professional,
yeah.
I mean
NFL, Major League NBA. Baseball, football, basically anything, any of the four major sports except for hockey in Canada It's a license to print money. Okay? Because there's a little bit of different economic realities in Canada, which I don't want to get into. But yeah, it's a license to print money. So when LeBron James left Cleveland, he wanted to win championships, right? But at the end of the day, LeBron James wants to build his empty. LeBron James has a agency for agents. He has a production company. Would you like to, when we do Blasphemers 2, you want to do it in LeBron James's production company?
Sure, why not?
And his whole angle was, I cannot grow my production company in Cleveland.
Somebody asked about Blasphemers 2.
Did they?
Yeah.
I would like to do that. That's on the table if money ever came through. But the point is that right now LeBron James wants all these players to come to LA, right? But at the end of the day, he's at his point in his life where he's about the brand. How do I become a billionaire like Michael Jordan? Like, at this point, winning championships don't matter anymore. I mean, he says he wants to win championships. Like, I want to win the indoor soccer championship. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But what am I doing about it? Am I going and working out or anything? No. It's like wishing. I got a magic fairy. So LeBron James is like, I wish I could win an NBA championship, but I'm working on my production company and 20 other things. And he's rubbing the lamp. Like, I wish I could. I wish there was something I could do about it.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. I mean, what is it, the Charlotte Hornets?
Charlotte Hornets.
If they're worth $1.25 billion, what's like Golden State worth?
Oh, I did not look that up, but I looked up the Cavs. Dan Gilbert bought the Cavs for, I believe, $375 million before Michael Jordan bought the Bobcats. Don't forget, Michael Jordan got a deal on the Bobcats. He got the bargain basement deal, right? The Cavs, without LeBron, are worth $1.2 billion, meaning Dan Gilbert has made $800 million on the Cavs. And that's with LeBron leaving twice. You see what I'm getting at? So Dan Gilbert can be mad all he wants, but his franchise is now worth a ton. Now, let's assume that Dan Gilbert's a nice guy. I don't necessarily agree, but let's assume it for a second, okay? Say you're Dan Gilbert. Pretend like you're Dan Gilbert. You're Dan Gilbert, okay? Some guy comes to you, and he's from Las Vegas, okay? And he goes, you know what? I want the Las Vegas Cavaliers, and I'm going to give you a check for $1.5 billion. Do you take that check?
If I'm Dan Gilbert?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Easy peasy. Go to LA or go to Las Vegas. I don't give a rat's ass. Is that check clear? Dan Gilbert's from Detroit. Now, I don't think Dan Gilbert would do that, but, because he's reinvested into Q and he owns, actually, he sold the casino, didn't he?
That I don't know.
But the point is that even what is winning and losing, me and Ted talk about this. I keep beating a dead horse with Ted. Who wins, who loses? LeBron James left, and you think that Dan Gilbert lost. And Dan Gilbert's like, oh, no, I see that back there. That's not a chest. That's a pile of money. And that's where I hide it, because I have so much money, I don't have anywhere to put it. Like, I can't even put it in banks, right? Because there's money everywhere. Well, what am I supposed to do, right? So that's what LeBron James wants. At this point, LeBron James can talk about chasing ghosts and winning championships. But when he went to the LA Lakers, he was showing that he wanted to be Michael Jordan billionaire, not Michael Jordan six-time NBA champion.
What does he have? 3 championships?
3 championships. Okay. But here's the problem.
And Jordan has, 6?
Yes. Jordan was 6-0. LeBron is 3-4. Remember? Because he lost 3 with the Cavs. He lost 1 the first go around. They lost to San Antonio, got swept.
Right.
He left, came back. They lost 2 to Golden State. In Miami, they lost the championship, right? And then they lost the championship in Miami. Oh, no, they lost 2 in Miami.
Yeah, they lost 2.
So he is 3 wins and 5 losses in championship games.
Yeah.
So LeBron's argument is, I took my team to 8 championships. And Jordan's like, what is it, 6-0?
Yeah, and the funny thing is that Jordan probably would have been 8-0.
Yeah, if he didn't play minor league ball. And that's
imagine that. I mean, they would have been like the Celtics in the, what was it, 50s or 60s?
Oh yeah, it would have been like the Oilers in the early 80s. Celtics. All your analogies are right. When Michael Jordan left, that's you're right. You're right. There's no arguing with it. So.
Because he basically missed 2 years.
Basically, I want to say maybe even 3. I know for sure 2. So, but it goes back to what is your motivation in life? Ted, is your motivation to be a billionaire?
Well, if it is, I'm doing a really poor job.
You're doing a piss poor job. Now, do you mind if we keep talking about money? I'm going to depress you some more.
Yeah, why not? Just
keep piling on.
Floor it.
Alexandria,
just be like Thelma and Louise.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Okay, what did she propose this week?
The new Green Deal.
The new Green Deal. I'm being honest with you, Ted. I'm being honest with you. I'm writing down here. Being honest with you. Did you read the new Green Deal?
No, I heard some points from it.
It was 14 pages. It was not that long. It was more of a big picture statement. Okay, and this will probably be our last thing before we go today. Is the Green New Deal. Now, I don't even know where to start because it's so terrible. Me and you talked about her before and how she basically wants free college, free housing, free this, free that. She wants things that there's not enough money that exists to do.
One thing, and I don't know how it would work or if it would work, but one thing that intrigues me is high-speed trains. I'm not saying that you get rid of planes. I'm saying, like she says, that's not what I'm getting at. I always wondered if it would be possible to do that in this country.
Oh, it is. It is. Because
I would almost like to see that happen. But like I said, I have no idea if it would work or if we should do it.
They have the technology to do it in China and Japan. Here's what would happen. I'm going to tell you what happened. Do you want to know what happened in America?
What?
I want a high-speed train between New York and Boston. Okay? Okay, that's great. How do we get the high-speed train there? Well, you're going to have to confiscate some property. Okay? Now, this is not China where they say, "Oh, we're going to confiscate your property and build a dam." And they're like, "We're going to the Supreme Court." And Chinese Supreme Court goes, right? In America, in order to have that high-speed train from Boston to New York, there are places you could not ever confiscate. Like, people would fight you to the Supreme Court for 50 years. Okay? Say you wanted a high-speed train between Ponticello, Idaho, right, and Colorado Springs, Colorado, you could probably do that. Okay? Because you would confiscate a lot of land where people are like, yeah, go ahead. And then the left wing in America be like, oh, no, you don't understand the green lizard. You know how many green lizards you're going to kill by putting that train through there?
And these are the same people who usually want things.
Yeah. Don't you want a high-speed train? Oh, God, not at the expense of the green lizard. Yeah, like you don't care about the green lizard. Like, what's wrong with you? So that's why it does not happen in America, right? Not because we can't do it. It's because it would never get out of the courts, ever. Okay? So anyhow, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm saying it's impractical. Maybe one day
Well, how did they get all the highway system then?
Well, they use eminent domain. But like in right now, if you want to build a freeway,
there weren't lawsuits back then.
There were, but eminent domain was back in the day in the 40s and 50s. Eminent domain was stronger than it is now. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, eminent domain, people would argue that it's stronger now than it was. But I'm like, that's not true. You're not building new highways anymore. You're not building new rail systems. Let me ask you a question. Do you think the Keystone Pipeline is a good idea?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's a good idea too. Why isn't it built?
Well, because you have enough people fighting it.
Every state somebody's fighting. Oh, God damn it! Don't put the pipeline through Elyria. Put it through Lorraine. And then the pipeline curves. And then they're like, you don't understand. Lorraine's a wetland, so you can't put the pipeline there. What the pipeline leaks into the wetland. And they're like, well, we'll put it in the country between Lorraine and Elyria. And they're like, okay. And then all of a sudden you're like, damn it! Indian burial ground! Because you remember the fight. We were on Beacon of Speech talking about the people fighting the pipeline because of the Indians. The Indians are like, we're done building pipelines in our country. Screw you. Not these Indians, those Indians. Screw you, we're not putting any more pipelines. You remember it, Ted.
Yeah.
It was all over the news. And right now you're like...
I remember, I think it was Glenn Beck said one time, he goes, he would drill through a caribou's head to get oil.
Well, that's the whole thing. Where we were talking about that city that used to be Barrow, and I can't pronounce it anymore. And people are like, you really want to build oil fields in the Arctic Reserve? And I'm like, there's nothing else there. Where else do you want it? Do you want to put it down in Wichita? Downtown Wichita? Slam some, put it in the frozen tundra of Alaska. Alaska looks small on the map. It's bigger than Texas. Go ahead and drill in the Arctic.
Like I always said, they should drill until this planet looks like a wiffle ball.
But that takes us back to our point. The Green New Deal. 14 pages. I actually read it. Okay? I'm going to go way back in the Wayback Machine. Okay? Way, way back. Do you remember one of the first Beacon of Speeches we had? I brought in an article from Forbes magazine, and it said, how much would the Death Star cost? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And we had a lot of fun building the Death Star and, spending all the world's money and stuff. And, making people slaves and, people calling off, I can't build the Death Star today, I don't feel good. Me and you had a lot of fun with it, right? They estimated that the Death Star would cost $852 quadrillion.
What is the Death Star again?
Okay, in Star Wars, all it is a moon, right? So instead of a real moon that you look out, the Death Star is a little floating moon that destroys planets. Okay, and that's why they call it the Death Star, right? So in theory, they said we have the technology in America and Russia and China to build a Death Star today. We could build a small satellite that could launch lasers and do a lot of damage, right? But it would cost $852 quadrillion, right? Which is more money than money that exists in the whole world times 200. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So we had fun with it. Ha 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 ha, right? So I read the Green New Deal, okay? Read the whole thing, all 14 pages. It wasn't that long. There's a lot of spaces, a lot of indentations. It's like reading a movie script, right? I took one line from the Green New Deal, right? And tell me, I assume you heard this, but maybe not. I think it was page 7, paragraph 2, line E or something like that. I'm trying to do it from memory, so I'm sorry. She said, every building in America needs to be retrofitted with green technology, and all houses need to be rebuilt using green technology.
Rebuilt.
What
do you mean, literally knocked down and built again?
Yeah. Knocked down, rebuilt, low flow toilets, green roofs, what's in your refrigerator? Freon, no Freon. Everything has to be zero emissions. Like when we build it, it is a zero. It doesn't kick off any exhaust. Your heating systems are all you see what I'm saying? It has to be a zero carbon footprint house. So your house isn't one, and mine certainly isn't one. Mine probably leaks gas into the neighborhood. Okay? But so you can figure out how much that cost, right? If you tore down, we're not even talking about businesses. Ignore businesses for 1 second, okay? If you rebuilt, the average house in America right now is $200,000.
Well, you know what's funny? I just thought of this. How much energy would it take to knock down every building?
No, no.
You know what
Don't
I'm saying?
think
That right there is going to emit so much.
Ted, you're ruining the Green New Deal, and I haven't even told you the punchline. Yeah, but you're right. Ted, you're absolutely right. How much would it cost to knock down all these houses?
Yeah, but then I know what their argument would be. Well, that's just a one-time thing.
Yeah, one-time thing. So they said, say the average house is $200,000. The argument is if your house costs $200,000, which mine doesn't, it would only cost like $250,000 to rebuild that house. So it's not like it would cost $1 million, right? So you can figure that out if there's 170 million houses in America or whatever it is, right? I don't have the numbers in front of me. Times $250,000. You know how much that adds up to? $25 trillion. It only costs
How many houses are in America?
I forgot the number, but I wrote it down in the article on Beacon of Speech. I wrote it down, I cited the thing. So it would only cost $25 trillion on the low end to knock down every house in America and rebuild it with green technologies. Now, does that sound like a deal? $25 trillion.
Sounds reasonable.
Do you know how much the entire budget was last year?
It was around 4 trillion, 4.2.
Yeah. So if we rebuild every house in America, that's 4 times our whole entire budget. That doesn't include Medicare, defense. That doesn't cover food stamps. That doesn't cover national defense. It doesn't cover NASA. We would spend 6 times what we make just to knock down every house and rebuild it. Doesn't count the Army, Navy, Marines, whatever, right? So number one, it's impractical. Now, her new Green Deal was 14 pages long, and it had to do with tearing down the power grid, tearing out electric, not using gas, going all wind and solar, right? I made an argument in the article that everything on the Green New Deal, if you actually added it up, it would cost between $500 billion and $1 quadrillion. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So now we are basically, her Green New Deal is about as practical as building the Death Star. You see what I'm getting at? And now people on the left are screaming, no, it costs 850 times more to do the Death Star.
A quadrillion is like, what, 1,000 trillion?
Yeah, 1,000 trillion.
So you're saying it would cost like around 500 trillion? Or?
Yeah, 500 trillion to a quadrillion to do the Green New Deal. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez just says print more money.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's never caused any problem.
Yeah. And then you say, what about Venezuela? And she's like, oh, no, we're going to do it the right way. Not like Venezuela. We're going to do it like Sweden. Okay, Sweden does not do that. I just read an article literally just today before we came on air. Denmark said they will not accept one more refugee because it spiked their Syrian refugee. It spiked their crime rates. And they said from now on, they have an island in Denmark. You know, they got 1,000 islands. They're putting high risk and repeat offender immigrants on an island like Alcatraz. So they said half the island will be jail and the other half will be halfway house. And they'll still be citizens of Denmark, but they're going to keep them in one place to keep an eye on them so the crime rate doesn't. Yeah, Ted, this is Denmark. This isn't America. This is Denmark doing this.
Yeah.
They're not building a wall. They're putting them on their own goddamn island, Ted. And people are like, oh, no, we want to be like Denmark. Oh, no, not like Denmark, like Sweden. Don't be like Denmark. Oh, is that the country with the island? No, don't do that. And that's why when she talks, like, Ted, I'm not the smartest guy, and you'll agree with me. I'm not the smartest guy, right? But using basic math skills, how hard is it to see how much a house costs and then how much it would cost to rebuild every house in America? It's super easy. I'm not a CNN reporter. I'm a dopey, run-of-the-mill blue-collar guy, right?
I honestly think that there's probably more people in this country than you think that literally don't know or care about stuff like that.
Yeah, but Dad, it's amazing to me. And again, in my head, I'm like thinking, Ted, right here, where I would go off the screen. There's a calculator right here. It's really easy to calculate. It's not calculus. It's not algebra. It's simple goddamn multiplication.
See,
how many houses?
Like I said, I think there's people who are just like, I don't care. I want that stuff.
Well, yeah, but that's the problem with her. But nobody challenges her. You know, I say something, and then 2 weeks later, I'm like, oh, I was wrong about that, and then I got to come on and say, oh, Ted, I was wrong about the statistics from the 1995 Chargers. Like things that don't matter, things that they're Ted, a half a quadrillion goddamn dollars. And people are like, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea. We're going to vote for.